The gates of the palace were still wet with blood, not from a battle, not from an enemy raid, but from a quiet massacre, a royal cleansing, a queen's thirst for power. It was early morning in Jerusalem. The sun had just begun to rise over the hills, casting a golden sheen across the Temple Mount, and somewhere inside the shadowy corridors of the palace, Athaliah, the queen mother, stood alone and smiled. Every heir to the throne was dead. Her own grandchildren murdered, one by one, their small, lifeless bodies removed from their beds, smothered or stabbed, then discarded like threats. She had done what no army had. She had ended the royal line. The house of David, once promised an eternal throne, was extinguished. Or so she thought. Because in a back room of the temple, hidden behind veils and hushed oaths, a secret was stirring. A baby, alive, and if that child lived, so would the wrath of God. This is the story of Athaliah, the queen who killed her way to the crown, and the single hidden child who survived her slaughter. To understand how the unthinkable happened, we have to go back. Back before the assassinations, back before the palace intrigue, back before the crown. Athaliah was born into blood. She was the daughter of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel of Israel, names still cursed to this day. Her father ruled the northern kingdom with cruelty and corruption. Her mother was worse. Jezebel didn't just bring Baal worship into Israel, she enforced it with terror. Prophets were executed. Altars to the God of Israel were torn down. Children were sacrificed. Paganism wasn't just tolerated, it was required. And Athaliah, she learned early that mercy was weakness. That kindness got you killed. That if you wanted to survive in the world of kings and queens, you had to strike first, and without remorse. As part of a political alliance, Athaliah was married off to Jehoram, the crown prince of Judah. It was a marriage of kingdoms, not love. The idea was simple: unite the north and the south through blood. But what came instead was chaos. Jehoram, like his new bride, was cold, violent, paranoid. As soon as he was crowned king, he murdered all 6 of his brothers. Not political rivals, his own family. And Athaliah? She didn't flinch. Together, they ruled Judah with an iron grip. They reintroduced Baal worship to the southern kingdom. They silenced opposition. They broke the commandments of Moses and mocked the God of David. And then, after 8 long years, Jehoram died in agony, struck by a mysterious illness the Bible describes as his bowels falling out. He left behind a son, Ahaziah, and Athaliah saw her chance. As queen mother, she could finally wield power without interference. Her son was young, impressionable. She could rule through him, pull the strings, whisper orders, guide the crown from behind the curtain. But then the plan shattered. Ahaziah, barely a year into his reign, was assassinated, not by enemies, but by allies. Jehu, a military commander sent by God to cleanse the north of wickedness, had launched a brutal coup. He executed both King Joram of Israel and Athaliah's son Ahaziah of Judah, wiping out the alliance with a single sword. Jezebel herself was thrown from a window and eaten by dogs in the street. It was chaos, and in that chaos, Athaliah made her move. The people of Judah were stunned. Their young king was dead, the royal line seemingly cut down in its prime. And Athaliah, grieving mother, royal widow, was expected to mourn. But she didn't. Instead, she seized the throne. No waiting, no counsel, no legal claim. She simply took it. But she didn't stop there. She knew how these things worked. Somewhere out there, one of Ahaziah's children could be alive. Some nursemaid, some distant aunt, some loyal servant could have taken one of the princes and fled. And if that child ever returned, her rule would be over. So she made a list. and had every remaining member of the royal family hunted down and killed. Children, toddlers, infants. If they had royal blood, they were marked for death. It was one of the most cold-blooded purges in biblical history, and it worked, almost. Because in the shadows of the palace, someone intervened. Her name was Jehosheba. She was Athaliah's own stepdaughter, a daughter of King Jehoram, sister to the slain King Ahaziah, and wife to Jehoiada, the high priest of Judah. And she had a secret. Before the soldiers arrived, before the cries echoed through the halls, before the assassins could check the nursery, Jehosheba slipped into the room and took one child, a baby boy. His name was Joash. She wrapped him in cloth, held him tight, and vanished into the temple. It was the one place Athaliah wouldn't dare look, because though she ruled the palace, she had no control over the temple of God. It was off-limits, holy, guarded by priests and Levites loyal to the covenant of David. A sacred domain she feared, because she knew what she'd done. For 6 years, Joash was hidden there, raised in secret, taught the scriptures, taught who he was, and who she was. Outside the walls, Athaliah reigned like a tyrant. She destroyed the altars of God and erected monuments to Baal. She plunged the kingdom into idolatry, violence, and fear. But inside the temple, the real king was growing, the last surviving heir, the promise of God preserved. And then, the wait was over. It was the 7th year of Athaliah's rule. The people were growing restless. The priesthood was watching, and Jehoiada, the high priest, knew the time had come. He summoned the captains of the guard, the temple guards, the Levites, the elders, and he told them the truth. The king lived. They didn't believe it, at first. But then he brought them into a private chamber and pulled back a curtain. There, standing before them, was Joash, 7 years old, barely more than a child, but royal, alive, the blood of David. They knelt, swore loyalty, and began to plan. It would be swift, public, undeniable. On the appointed Sabbath, the temple was filled with people, worshippers, guards, priests, musicians. Jehoiada had stationed soldiers at every gate, armed with spears taken from the palace of David himself. And then, in front of the crowd, he brought out the boy. They placed a crown on his head, handed him a copy of the law, and anointed him king. The shouts were deafening. "Long live the king!" Trumpets blared, singers sang, the people rejoiced. And somewhere, in her palace, Athaliah heard the sound. She stormed toward the temple, her robes whipping in the wind, her hands clutching the edge of the stone gate. What she saw froze her in place. A boy, crowned, standing beside the high priest, surrounded by guards, surrounded by worship, alive. And in that moment, she knew. The bloodline hadn't been broken. Her murders hadn't been enough. She screamed, "Treason! Treason!" But no one followed her. Jehoiada gave the order. "Take her outside these walls. Do not kill her in the temple of the Lord." The guards obeyed. They dragged her from the gates and executed her by the horse gate, where the soldiers once rode out for war. Joash became king that day. He would rule for 40 years. And though his own story would take dark turns, his survival marked the continuation of the Davidic line, through which the Messiah would one day come. Athaliah's reign was erased. Her name became synonymous with betrayal, with tyranny, with the unthinkable, a woman who murdered her own grandchildren for power. But the God of Israel was not mocked. He preserved his promise. He protected the line. He saved a child and exposed a queen. Thank you for listening to Divine Crime. Subscribe for more true stories from the most dangerous book ever written.